All right, chapter 17, the Roaring Twenties. As we return from World War I, and things are good. There's a couple things bad, but most things are good. So let's talk about the Roaring Twenties. First off, we talked about labor unrest. There's a lot of problems in industry in the early parts of the 20s. 3,000 strikes in 1919. And labor unions and strikes are associated with radicals. Everybody believes that the people that are in the labor unions are immigrants, and the immigrants are communists and socialists and anarchists, and the anti-integration movement is really going to pick up strength heading into the 1920s. And, you know, we just finished this war, and you would think we would want to be involved in, you know, the world affairs to prevent things like World War I from happening, but we took the opposite stance. Public support for isolationism increases. The League of Nations fails. Things don't. We're going to turn ourselves right back to being an isolationist state, not interested in what's going on in the world. Pause here. Meanwhile, there's a threat of communism. Lenin and the Bolsheviks have established a communist state in Russia. They're calling for a worldwide revolution. They want everybody to become communist. A communist party, in fact, is formed in the United States in 1919. And people are really, really afraid of communism because, again, in the United States, we've always been about personal property and your ability to own your property and do what you want to do. Communism is all about the government owns all the property and does what it wants to do with it, and everyone has to share the wealth. Well, we are scared to death that the communists are going to come take over the United States. This is called the Red Scare. It leads to what's called the Palmer raids. Palmer is the Attorney General of the United States, and Palmer leads an attempt to eliminate communism. Thousands of people are arrested. Thousands of people are deported as we try to get rid of the communists, as we're scared to death of communists. Okay. Pause here. Now, heading into the 1920s. Prohibition passes. The 19th Amendment, or the 18th Amendment, I'm sorry, passes. It's prohibition. It's backed up by something called the Volstead Act. The Volstead Act gives the government the power to enforce prohibition. But it's very difficult to enforce. Speakeasies pop up all over, everywhere. Saloons. Bootleggers are keeping the alcohol moving, as people don't want to give up their alcohol. The government doesn't put enough money towards prohibition for it really to be terribly effective. They don't spend enough money to stop production of alcohol everywhere. But what really happens, the bad thing, the unintended consequence is when you have prohibition, people want their alcohol. And to provide that alcohol, organized crime comes up in many cities. When you talk about Al Capone and when you talk about the Five Families in New York, all those are basically started really around alcohol and the delivering of alcohol. So organized crime gets started here. All through the 20s, you're going to have prohibition. It's not repealed until America wakes up and says, hey, this is really not a good idea. And that doesn't happen until 1933 with the 21st Amendment. So all through the 20s, you have to remember, prohibition is in effect. Pause here. Let's talk about the election in 1920. Wilson has not able to run, and he probably would not have run even if he could have, because that would have been a third term, and nobody runs for a third term. So it comes down to Warren G. Harding versus James Cox. Also involved is the socialist, representing basically the communists, is Eugene V. Debs. Harding is going to win. He's going to promise a return to normalcy. He wants to get back to what we were before the war, before all this craziness happened. Limited government, lower taxes, higher tariffs, back to where we've been pretty much for most of our history. The economy is going to gain strength. There's a slight depression in 1920-21, but after that, the economy picks up. Productivity increases. Things are going great. Harding promotes naval disarmament, as we talk about, getting rid of spending all this money on the Navy. We don't want to be in the arms race. We're going to disarm our Navy. And Harding's doing a great job, except for a couple scandals. The biggest one was called the Teapot Dome scandal. And these scandals are going to damage his reputation. These were Scandals where elected officials took advantage of bribes and things to give contracts. And it was some people in his administration kind of made him look bad. But basically, everything's going great. Things are going well. Now, where is it not going great? Germany is not going great. In Germany, the reparations clause from the Treaty of Versailles is causing Germany, inflation in Germany is horrific. And you can see this guy here has got just stacks of money. He's going to buy something like bread. It takes a wheelbarrow full of money to buy bread. Germany is in a disastrous mess. And while we're not paying attention and we're doing our own thing, this is happening in Germany, which is going to lead to some guy named Hitler. So, pause here. Some interesting cases occur, some of the most famous cases in American history. Number one is Sacco and Vanzetti. I always thought this was a fun name when I was a kid. Sacco and Vanzetti, these are two Italian immigrants charged with murder in 1920. These guys may or may not have done it. We don't really know. It was a pretty flimsy case. And supporters claim this prosecution was the trial was unfair because these guys were Italian American. They couldn't read nor write nor understand what was going on, couldn't understand the case, couldn't understand anything about it. But despite some very flimsy evidence, Sacco and Vanzetti are executed in 1927. This leads to protests all around the world as people say, how can you treat your immigrants this way? How can you treat people this way? You know, these people deserved better. So Sacco and Vanzetti take the fall, even though they may not have done it, a lot in part because they are immigrants and people don't like immigrants. At least that's what the people who said they were innocent believed. Pause here. The Scopes monkey trial, one of the most famous trials in history. Evolution goes on trial in 1925. A guy named John Scopes is a teacher, and he teaches in his biology class Darwin's theory of evolution. You can't teach Darwin's theory of evolution in Tennessee. Tennessee is a strict religious state, and they don't believe in evolution. So when Scopes teaches evolution, he is in violation of the law. This leads to a trial where you're going to put basically evolution on trial. Scopes' defending attorney is a guy named William Jennings Bryan, the guy who's run for president 4 times. We're talking about some big name lawyers involved here. And at this trial, it gets known as the monkey trial because when you think about evolution, we come from monkeys according to evolution. So this is all about whether we come from monkeys or not. It becomes called the Scopes monkey trial. It's a battle over the role of science and religion in society. And what basically happens is the state of Tennessee wins. Scopes found guilty, fined $100, and told you can't teach evolution in class. So evolution loses as religion still rules today in Tennessee. Pause here. Ku Klux Klan is going to rise yet again. Their popularity is going to pick up. The Red Scare, the whole idea of communism, is a good reason for the Ku Klux Klan to come back. They can claim that it's communists and foreigners and immigrants and Jews and Catholics, and they go out at everybody. They're in favor of prohibition. They think prohibition's great. So they attract a lot of people. By 1924, their membership's up to 4.5 million. It's a very large amount of people in the Ku Klux Klan. They're even able to help push through Congress something called the Immigration Quota Act of 1921, which limited immigration, especially targeting Southeast Europe. Anybody who was near the Soviet Union, they're going to try to ban from coming in, again, in fear of communism. The Ku Klux Klan comes back yet again, very strong. You can see them here. They are marching down Pennsylvania Avenue. So the Ku Klux Klan is back in the 1920s. Pause here.